A common political mandate handed to junior planners is to copy a famous foreign development hub and drop it onto an emerging landscape. This puts pressure on first-level planners, the Kalan Paranchana, to engineer high-speed growth by importing trending global models. This practice drives policy diffusion. Policy diffusion is the rapid, often unquestioned transfer of regional development policies from developed nations to emerging economies. The innovation cluster is the model politicians frequently demand be replicated, with Silicon Valley standing as the global archetype. The second most copied model is the isolated foreign direct investment financial or export hub. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, is an investment made by a firm or individual in one country into business interests located in another country. Dublin's International Financial Services Centre serves as the primary example of this type of imported financial enclave. Relying on these models reveals a professional misconception: the belief that these spatial policies and economic models are geographically neutral and universally applicable. Assuming spatial policies are plug-and-play risks capital misallocation. A blueprint designed for one economic ecosystem often fails to perform when applied to another without local translation. Traditional top-down regional planning in the late 20th century relied heavily on this one-size-fits-all approach. Replicating standardized policies across borders ignores the foundational economic conditions of the target region. It also bypasses the complex social and political realities of the local jurisdiction where the policy is deployed. Development literature identifies this blind, standardized replication as the primary internal factor behind the failure of traditional development strategies. Planners must move away from centralized, exogenous replication. Exogenous development is an economic strategy that relies on attracting external resources, like multinational corporations, into a region. Sustainable growth requires decentralized, endogenous capacity building. Endogenous development focuses on mobilizing a region's own internal assets, including local businesses, indigenous skills, and human capital. To engineer sustainable territorial growth, planners cannot just buy a foreign model, they must build structural competitiveness from the ground up. Traditional top-down planning defaults almost entirely to what economists call hardware. Hardware consists of highly visible, easily funded physical assets, such as transport networks, basic infrastructure, and industrial spaces. Hardware alone is insufficient to stimulate growth without a complementary layer of software. Software represents the comprehensive strategies required to embed economic activity into a region, specifically human capital upgrading, labor skill alignment, and boosting local firm competitiveness. Even with hardware and software in place, policy diffusion frequently misses the critical third layer, Orgware. Orgware refers to the institutional capacity, the governance structures, and the network of local stakeholders required to manage the physical infrastructure and the economic strategies. This demonstrates how exogenous investment balances perfectly only when hardware, software, and Orgware actively support it. When a copied policy ignores local capacity, the system fails. Without software and Orgware to distribute the weight, the FDI block tips over and shatters. Pouring concrete for hardware without intentionally building local Orgware and software leads to capital flight and empty industrial parks, not sustainable regional growth. Policy diffusion fails under traditional top-down administration because national centers cannot accurately dictate the highly specific software needs of varied local regions. This compares two models. On the left, traditional top-down administration relies on a rigid hierarchy and one-way subsidies. On the right, the bottom-up model features a decentralized network. This represents the transition from government, relying on hierarchical intervention, to governance, steering fluid networks and partnerships. Modern Kalan Prachana manage system networks rather than simply drafting bureaucratic regulations for national subsidies. The modern planner fosters institutional thickness within their specific jurisdiction. Institutional thickness is the dense network of interactive local organizations, businesses, and civic groups that collectively support economic growth. Contemporary regional development involves local meta-governance to steer a complex, adaptable network of stakeholders. Local administrations face intense political pressure to import exogenous resources, specifically FDI, to boost local GDP figures. The primary spatial tool used by emerging economies to attract this capital is the Export Processing Zone, or EPZ. An EPZ is a designated area within a country that offers tax incentives and duty-free export to attract foreign manufacturing operations. Development literature offers a warning regarding these zones. Without careful planning, EPZs fail to create any meaningful linkages with the existing local industry. This matrix compares exogenous against endogenous resources. An EPZ often gets stuck in the exogenous quadrant, isolated by a thick wall. When local software is weak, the EPZ becomes an enclave. Value flows outward as capital flight, resulting in zero technology transfer for the local workforce. Foreign spatial models only generate true regional development when local governance actively connects exogenous capital to indigenous supply chains. Planners must accept a structural reality. Not every region can, or even wants to, be the next Silicon Valley. Effective regional planning must acknowledge economic path dependency. Path dependency is the concept that a region's future growth options are heavily constrained by its specific historical, economic, and social trajectory. The outdated donor-recipient model relies on simple wealth redistribution. A central node, representing the capital, pushes resources outward to passive regional nodes. In the modern growth-oriented model, each region pulses with independent activity. Unique growth trajectories extend from each local node, representing self-determined, path-dependent performance. Decentralization allows planners to focus on identifying and mobilizing the specific potential of their region, rather than waiting for spatial redistribution from the capital. Before adopting a diffused foreign policy model, a planner must rigidly evaluate their local institutional capacity. Policy transfer must always be a meticulous act of translation and adaptation, never blind replication.